Denver sells a postcard of mountain skylines, glass towers, craft breweries, red sunsets, and the clean American dream rising 1 mile above sea level. But beneath that polished glow, under bridges, beside bus stops, behind hotels, and along frozen sidewalks, another Denver is rotting in plain sight, a city where people can sleep within sight of luxury apartments and still wonder if the cold will let them wake up. Tonight, we take you into Denver, Colorado, the Mile High City, a place many Americans imagine as opportunity wrapped in mountain air. It is the city of Union Station, downtown lights, sports arenas, tech workers, outdoor brands, and weekend trips to the Rockies. It is a city that tells the world to breathe deeper, climb higher, and live better. But for thousands of people without stable housing, Denver does not feel higher. It feels harder. The air is thin, the nights are sharp, and the streets can turn from merely uncomfortable to dangerous in a matter of hours. A person can sit outside a restaurant where plates cost more than they have spent on food all week. A family can drive past new apartment buildings they will never afford while wondering how long they can keep sleeping in a car before someone notices. A man can be moved from one sidewalk to another, from one encampment to one temporary bed, and still never reach the one thing he needs most: a permanent home. This is not just a story about tents. It is a story about rent, cold, policy, addiction, exhaustion, and the fragile distance between a normal life and a life lived outside. Stay with this story until the end, because Denver's crisis is not as simple as the headlines make it sound. Some numbers show progress. Some streets look cleaner than they did 2 years ago. Some encampments have disappeared. But behind the cleaner blocks, the crisis has not vanished. It has moved, shifted, hidden, and in many cases become harder to see. And when suffering becomes less visible, it becomes easier for a city to pretend it has been solved. One, the numbers behind the Mile High crisis. Every year, communities across the country conduct what is called a point in time count, a one night snapshot of homelessness in January. In the Metro Denver region, the 2026 count showed 9,950 people experiencing homelessness across the seven-county area. That was an 8% decrease from the previous year. The number of people sleeping outdoors also fell, dropping from 2,149 inches 2025 to 1,703 inches 2026. On paper, that sounds like progress, and in many ways it is. Fewer people sleeping outside means fewer people exposed to freezing wind, fewer people trying to survive under tarps, fewer people waking up with frost on their blankets. But one night does not tell the whole story. The point in time count is just a snapshot. It does not capture every person sleeping in a car. It does not fully show families doubled up in overcrowded apartments, teenagers couch surfing, workers living quietly in motels, or people hiding because they are afraid of losing their children, their belongings, or their privacy. It does not measure how many people cycle in and out of homelessness throughout the year. It does not show the person who had shelter in January but lost it in March. It does not show the mother who slept outside for 2 weeks before a church paid for a motel. It does not show every life on the edge. In the city of Denver itself, officials have celebrated major reductions in unsheltered homelessness since Mayor Mike Johnston launched his homelessness initiatives. City leaders point to hundreds of blocks cleared of large encampments and thousands of people brought indoors through hotel shelters, micro communities, and temporary housing programs. But even in that progress, there is a painful contradiction. Street homelessness can go down, while total homelessness remains painfully high. Tents can disappear while people remain trapped in shelters. A camp can be closed while the person who lived there still has nowhere permanent to go. A sidewalk can look cleaner while a life remains unstable. That is the strange truth of Denver in 2026. The city can claim success and still be in crisis. The skyline can shine while families wait for shelter. The streets can look more orderly while people remain one emergency away from collapse. If you walk through downtown Denver on a cold night, would you see progress or would you see people still waiting for the promise behind that progress to reach them? Two, rising rent and the quiet road into homelessness. Most people do not become homeless in one dramatic moment. It usually happens slowly, painfully, and almost invisibly. A rent increase arrives in the mail, a work schedule gets cut, a car breaks down, a medical bill lands on the kitchen table, a child gets sick, a relationship ends, a landlord decides not to renew the lease, the grocery bill climbs, the heating bill climbs. The rent does not wait for wages to catch up. In Colorado, housing affordability has become one of the deepest pressures on working families. A 2025 housing affordability report found that 51% of renters in the state are cost burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. For many families, that means the budget is not stretched, it is already broken. And Denver is the pressure point. The city has attracted people for years: tech workers, young professionals, students, outdoor lovers, remote workers, investors, and families chasing a better life. But growth brings a cost. Neighborhoods change, old apartments become renovated units, working class renters find themselves surrounded by prices designed for someone else. The city gets more desirable, and the people who kept it running begin to feel like visitors in their own home. A restaurant worker may serve dinner in low dough and sleep in a car outside the city. A janitor may clean offices in buildings where 1 month of rent equals their entire paycheck. A single mother may work two jobs and still fall behind because daycare, gas, food, and rent all rise together. There is a certain cruelty in being surrounded by prosperity you cannot touch. Imagine walking past luxury apartments with heated garages and rooftop lounges while you are carrying everything you own in a backpack. Imagine seeing signs that say, now leasing everywhere, but knowing the deposit alone is impossible. Imagine being told the city is booming while your own life is falling apart. This is how homelessness begins for many people in Denver. Not with laziness, not with a lack of dreams, but with math that no longer works. When rent rises faster than survival, the street becomes the final invoice. Three, cold nights in a city that runs out of room. Denver's cold does not always look dramatic from the inside of a warm building. From behind a window, snow can look beautiful. Downtown lights can glow through winter air. The mountains can turn blue in the distance. But outside, cold is not scenery. It is pressure. It enters through shoes, gloves, torn sleeves, and thin blankets. It turns concrete into a body thief. It steals sleep first, then energy, then judgment, then hope. For people living outside, winter is not one season. It is a nightly negotiation with danger. Denver has cold weather shelter plans, and the city has opened emergency spaces when temperatures drop. But reporting in early 2026 showed that the city and advocates were still arguing over whether there were enough cold weather beds, where those shelters should be placed, and whether the burden was being concentrated in some neighborhoods more than others. That is where policy becomes personal. When city council debates shelter locations, someone outside is counting hours until the temperature falls. When officials argue over contracts, a man is deciding whether to sleep near a vent, in a doorway, or under an overpass. When neighborhoods object to new shelters, a woman with swollen feet is trying to find a bus route to anywhere warm. And yes, many residents have real concerns. They worry about safety, trash, drug use, and whether their neighborhoods are absorbing too many services while wealthier parts of the city remain untouched. Those concerns are part of the story too. But the cold does not care about political boundaries. The cold does not ask whether a district has already done its share. It does not wait for a better site. It does not care if a contract failed, if a hotel is controversial, or if the city needs more time. The cold simply arrives. There are people in Denver who have learned to sleep in layers so thick they can barely move. Some put cardboard beneath their bodies because the ground pulls warmth downward. Some sleep sitting up because lying flat feels too exposed. Some walk all night because stopping means shaking. Some refuse shelters because they have experienced theft, fights, trauma, or rules that make them feel less human. Some are too deep in mental illness to understand the risk. Some want help but cannot reach it in time. And in the morning, the city wakes up. Coffee shops open, traffic builds, office workers hurry across icy sidewalks. The people who survive the night quietly fold their blankets and move before someone tells them to leave. How many cold nights can a person survive before the city stops seeing them as a person and starts seeing them as part of the landscape? 4. Camps, cleanups, and the question nobody wants to answer. Denver's encampments have become one of the most emotional and politically charged parts of the crisis. For business owners, encampments can feel like a sign that the city is losing control. For parents, they can create fear near schools and parks. For residents, they can bring concerns about trash, fires, needles, and safety. For people living in them, camps can be dangerous, unstable, and heartbreaking, but they can also be the only community they have left. That is the painful contradiction. A tent is not a home. But for someone with nowhere else to go, it may be the closest thing to one. Denver has removed many large encampments under its homelessness strategy. Officials say the goal is not simply to push people around, but to bring them indoors. Supporters argue that tents are not safe, that sidewalks are not housing, and that people need shelter, treatment, case management, and stability. Critics respond with a different question. What happens after the camp is gone? If a person moves from a tent to a temporary shelter but never reaches permanent housing, has the crisis been solved, or has it just been rearranged? If belongings are lost during a cleanup, IDs, medication, family photos, winter gear, how much harder does it become for that person to rebuild? If money is spent on enforcement and cleanup without clear tracking, how can residents know whether the system is working? This is where public trust begins to crack. Some audits and investigations have raised concerns about how Denver tracks costs related to encampment cleanups and whether there is enough accountability. Some residents in comment sections go further, whispering that homelessness has become its own economy. Contracts, cleanup crews, hotel operators, consultants, nonprofits, political promises, and press conferences all circling around human misery. To be clear, there is no official proof of some grand conspiracy controlling Denver's homelessness response, but the suspicion itself says something important. When people see millions spent and still see suffering on the streets, they begin to ask where the money goes. When they see tents removed, but families still waiting, they begin to wonder who benefits from half solutions. When a crisis lasts long enough, even compassion can turn into distrust. And that distrust is dangerous because once people stop believing the system is honest, every decision starts to look like theater. Every shelter opening looks like public relations. Every cleanup looks like image control. Every budget cut looks like abandonment. The truth may be less dramatic, but no less painful. Denver is trying to solve an extremely complicated crisis with limited money, limited housing, neighborhood resistance, political pressure, and a population whose needs are far deeper than a temporary bed. Still, the question remains, if a city clears the tents but does not create enough permanent homes, what exactly has been cleaned? 5. Addiction, trauma, and the streets that do not let people heal. No honest story about homelessness in Denver can ignore addiction and mental health. But addiction is not the beginning of every homelessness story. Sometimes it is the cause, sometimes it is the result. Sometimes it is both. Sometimes a person loses housing first, then uses substances to survive the cold, the fear, the pain, and the humiliation. Sometimes addiction destroys a job, then a marriage, then a lease, then a life. Sometimes untreated trauma sits underneath everything. Fentanyl has changed the street crisis across America, and Denver is not separate from that wave. The drug is cheap, powerful, and unforgiving. It moves through camps, alleys, motel rooms, public bathrooms, and quiet corners where people use alone because shame has driven them out of sight. A person living outside is already exposed to danger. Add fentanyl, and the danger multiplies. Overdose can happen in minutes. Withdrawal can feel like the body is being punished from the inside. Recovery becomes harder when there is no bed, no shower, no safe storage for medication, no stable phone, no transportation, and no quiet place to make a decision that could save your life. People often ask, why don't they just get help? But help is not a button someone presses. Help can mean waiting lists, paperwork, ID requirements, missed appointments, transportation problems, shelter curfews, mental health episodes, relapse, and shame. Help can mean telling your story again and again to strangers while you are exhausted, hungry, and afraid. Help can mean trusting a system that may have already failed you. On the streets, every wound gets deeper. A small infection becomes serious. Anxiety becomes paranoia. Depression becomes silence. A person who once had a job, a family, a favorite song, a favorite meal, and a normal Tuesday can become someone strangers step around on the sidewalk. But they are still there. Under the addiction, there is still a person. Under the dirty coat, there is still memory. Under the shaking hands, there may be someone who once packed school lunches, fixed cars, played guitar, cared for a parent, served in the military, or dreamed about owning a house near the mountains. If someone you loved disappeared into that world, would you call them lost, or would you keep looking for the part of them still trying to survive? 6. Families, children, seniors, and the hidden homeless. The public often imagines homelessness as a single adult sleeping outside, but Denver's crisis is wider than that. There are families waiting for emergency shelter. There are children sleeping in cars, motels, parks, or on couches. There are mothers trying to keep school routines alive while their belongings are packed in trash bags. There are fathers who leave before sunrise to look for work while their kids ask when they are going home. There are teenagers hiding their situation from classmates because shame is heavy even when you are young. Reports in late 2025 showed Denver's family shelter waitlist had grown sharply. Hundreds of individuals in family households were waiting for space. Some families were in hotels, some were couch surfing, some were in cars, some were outside. That is the part many people do not see. Family homelessness is often hidden because parents are afraid, afraid of judgment, afraid of child protective services, afraid of being separated, afraid that asking for help will expose how fragile everything has become. Imagine being a child in Denver, looking at snow outside the car window, pretending this is temporary because your parent is trying so hard to make it feel normal. Imagine doing homework with a flashlight. Imagine brushing your teeth in a gas station bathroom. Imagine hearing adults talk quietly about shelter beds and wait lists while you pretend to sleep in the back seat. Then there are seniors. Older adults experiencing homelessness carry a different kind of exhaustion. Their bodies do not recover from cold the same way. Their knees hurt. Their medications are hard to store. Their memories may slip. Their pride may keep them from asking for help until they are already in crisis. Some worked for decades. Some paid rent for most of their lives. Some raised children in the same state where they now sleep outside. Veterans face another layer: trauma, disability, isolation, and the painful reality of having served a country that now struggles to house them. Women face dangers that are often hidden from public view: harassment, assault, exploitation, domestic violence, and the constant need to calculate where they can sleep without being noticed by the wrong person. And then there are the hidden homeless people, not always counted, not always visible, not always understood. They are the people in weekly motels, overcrowded rooms, garages, vehicles, and temporary arrangements that can collapse with one argument or one missed payment. Denver's homelessness crisis is not just what you see on the sidewalk. It is what families hide in silence because they are still trying to look okay. 7. The promise and limits of all in Mile High. Mayor Mike Johnston made homelessness the defining issue of his administration. His programs, first House 1000 and then All in Mile High, aimed to bring thousands of people indoors and close the large encampments that had become visible symbols of the city's crisis. The city reports that thousands of people have been moved indoors through these efforts. Large encampments have been dramatically reduced. Many people who were once sleeping outside now have access to beds, bathrooms, meals, case managers, and safer spaces than the street. That matters. A hotel room can mean a door that locks. A tiny home can mean sleep without fear of being stepped over. A non-congregate shelter can mean privacy after years of exposure. For someone who has been outside for months or years, going indoors can be the first breath after drowning. But getting indoors is not the same as getting home. This is the difficult part of Denver's story. The city has had more success moving people off the street than moving people into permanent housing. Budget pressures, lost housing vouchers, federal and state funding cuts, and limited affordable units all make that final step harder. Temporary shelter can save lives, but if people stay temporary for too long, hope begins to wear thin. A person can be grateful for a room and still feel trapped. A family can be safer than before and still have no future plan. A city can count someone as no longer unsheltered while that person remains homeless. That is why permanent housing matters. Without it, people remain in limbo, and limbo is exhausting. It is better than the sidewalk, but it is not stability. It is safer than a tent, but it is not home. Denver's leaders say the city is building a coordinated, data-driven system. Advocates say the city must move faster, distribute shelters more fairly, protect belongings, preserve dignity, and create housing people can actually afford. Residents want safety and accountability. Business owners want clean sidewalks. Families want shelter. People outside want to stop being moved from place to place. Everyone wants something, but the people with the least power are the ones paying the highest price for delay. 8. The city's moral test. Denver is not failing because it has done nothing. Denver is struggling because what it has done is still not enough. This is what makes the story complicated. It is easy to blame one mayor, one policy, one political party, one nonprofit, one group of residents, or one group of unhoused people. But homelessness is a system failure built from many failures stacked together. Housing costs, low wages, addiction, mental illness, trauma, eviction, disability, family breakdown, bureaucracy, neighborhood resistance, and years of underbuilding affordable homes. No single shelter can fix that. No sweep can fix that. No press conference can fix that. No one night count can fully explain that. The question is whether Denver can keep its humanity while it tries. Because every city eventually reveals its values not through what it builds for the wealthy, but through what it protects for the vulnerable. Denver has world-class views. It has booming neighborhoods, sports pride, mountain access, and cultural energy. It has people who care deeply, volunteers who show up before sunrise, outreach workers who remember names, churches that open doors, nonprofits that keep serving meals, and residents who refuse to look away. But it also has families waiting, seniors freezing, people relapsing, shelters under pressure, neighborhoods fighting over responsibility, taxpayers demanding answers, and human beings who are tired of being treated like problems to manage instead of people to house. So tonight, as we look at Denver, we are not looking at a city without hope. We are looking at a city standing at a crossroads. One path says homelessness can be managed, moved, hidden, counted, and cleaned. The other path says it must be ended with housing, treatment, accountability, prevention, and compassion strong enough to survive politics. Which path will Denver choose, and what does that choice say about America? Final message. There is a moment in Denver when the sun drops behind the mountains and the whole city turns gold. For a few minutes, everything looks beautiful. The skyline glows, the streets soften, the Rockies stand in the distance like a promise. But as the light fades, The cold returns. Someone zips a tent. Someone checks the battery on a phone they need for a housing appointment. Someone wraps a child in an extra sweatshirt. Someone stands in line for shelter. Someone decides whether to risk sleeping outside. Someone whispers a prayer that morning will come. These people are not statistics. They are not scenery. They are not political talking points. They are neighbors, workers, parents, veterans, sons, daughters, and human beings whose lives have been pushed to the edge. Maybe Denver's progress is real. Maybe its leaders are trying. Maybe the numbers are improving. But no city should declare victory while people are still freezing, waiting, hiding, and wondering where they belong. If this story stayed with you, tell us in the comments. What do you think Denver should do first? Build more housing, expand shelter, increase treatment, protect families, or demand more accountability from the system? And if you believe these stories deserve to be seen, please like this video, share your thoughts, and subscribe to U.S. Homeless Stories. Your support helps keep these hidden lives visible. May every person sleeping outside in Denver find warmth tonight. May every family waiting for shelter find safety. May every person battling addiction find one more chance. May every official making decisions remember the human faces behind the numbers. And may the Mile High City rise not just in skyline, but in mercy.